What if the town everyone thought they knew was quietly hiding some of the saddest and most surprising stories in television history? Mayberry was never about big drama. It was about a sheriff who barely carried a gun, a deputy who tried way too hard, and a town where every porch and courthouse bench felt like home. But 66 years after it first aired, almost everyone who built that town is gone, and one or two career turns from this cast are so strange you will not believe they are real. Stick around, because one name on this list did something nobody saw coming. Number 1, we have the man who was Mayberry itself. Before he ever put on a badge, he was already a stage and film star, and later he would trade his gentle sheriff hat for a courtroom in a totally different hit show. That man was Andy Griffith, who played Sheriff Andy Taylor starting at age 34. He built Mayberry on patience and quiet charm, instead of shouting, and decades later he came back strong as the sharp-tongued lawyer on Matlock. In 2012, at 86 years old, his heart finally gave out. Mayberry only worked because its sheriff never needed to raise his voice, and Andy Griffith made sure of that. Number 2, we have the woman who ran the Taylor house with a wooden spoon and a worried look. She had a full Broadway career before television ever heard her name, yet millions only ever think of her in one kitchen, in one small town. That was Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee at age 57. When the cameras stopped rolling for good, she did something almost nobody expected. She packed up and disappeared into a quiet life in North Carolina, walking away from fame completely. She died in 1989 at 86 from heart failure, and by then she had not acted in years by choice. Aunt Bee fed a whole town on screen, and off-screen, she chose silence over the spotlight. Number 3, we have the most nervous man who ever wore a badge, and his story is the one that hits hardest on this list. He built his whole career on being scared out of his mind on purpose, turning a shaky hand and a squeaky voice into one of the most iconic characters in TV history. That was Don Knotts, who played Barney Fife starting at 36 years old. After Mayberry, he kept chasing laughs in films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken, still finding new ways to be lovably terrified on screen. You would think a man that funny got to grow old easy, but life had other plans, and lung cancer complications took him in 2006 at age 81. Barney Fife could not shoot straight and barely trusted his own gun, yet somehow he is the character fans quote the most, decades later. Number 4, we have the grease monkey with the goofy grin, who felt like he belonged at every filling station in America. His small-town charm did not stop when Mayberry ended, it just followed him into another hit show, and then into cartoon voices for Disney. That was George Lindsey, who played Goober Pyle at age 35. He carried that same easy humor into Hee Haw, and lent his voice to animated classics for years afterward. He died in 2012 at 83 from heart failure. Goober never tried to be the smartest guy in the room, and that is exactly why Mayberry loved him. Number 5, we have the man behind the scissors, who somehow turned haircuts into must-watch television. Before he ever touched a comb in Mayberry, he was already playing a doctor on the radio version of Gunsmoke. That was Howard McNear, who played Floyd Lawson starting at 55. A stroke later slowed him down badly, but he pushed through and kept coming back to Mayberry in a smaller role anyway. He died in 1969 at just 63, from complications tied to that same stroke. Floyd barely needed a punchline. One strange pause from him was funnier than most people's whole scripts. Number 6, we have a face you probably would not pick out of a lineup, but you have absolutely seen him standing in the background of Mayberry more than once. He never chased the spotlight, he just showed up as one of the town's many familiar faces. That was Tom Jacobs, who appeared as a Mayberry townsman at 57 years old. He kept working in small roles on shows like The Danny Thomas Show for years afterward. He died in 1976 at 72, with no cause widely reported. Mayberry needed people like him just standing there, because a town with only 5 characters would not have felt like a town at all. It has been 66 years since Mayberry first showed up on television, and if that number does not stop you for a second, nothing will. Number 7, we have the school teacher who refused to just be somebody's girlfriend on screen. Before Mayberry, she survived a giant killer blob alongside Steve McQueen in one of the strangest sci-fi films of its era. That was Aneta Corsaut, who played Helen Crump at 29 years old. She kept working steadily for years, later even popping up on Matlock alongside Andy Griffith himself. She died in 1995 at 62 after a battle with cancer. Helen Crump was never written as just Andy's love interest, and Corsaut made sure viewers felt that difference every single episode. Number 8, we have the county clerk, who somehow turned pure nervous energy into one of the show's most quietly funny characters. He came straight from serious stage training, and you can feel that discipline in every twitchy little pause he gave. That was Jack Dodson, who played Howard Sprague at age 34. He later carried the role into Mayberry RFD, and even showed up on Happy Days years afterward. He died in 1994 at 63 from heart failure. Howard treated every tiny problem like a 5-alarm emergency, and somehow that made him one of the most human characters in the whole town. Number 9, we have the town's favorite harmless troublemaker, a man who locked himself in his own jail cell and somehow made it charming instead of sad. His voice traveled a lot further than Mayberry ever did, turning up in classic cartoons for years. That was Hal Smith, who played Otis Campbell at age 44. His voice work stretched across beloved animated shows long after his Mayberry days were behind him. He died in 1994 at 77, apparently from a heart attack. Otis could have been the town joke, but Mayberry forgave him before he even sobered up. And so did every viewer watching. If you are still with us, drop a comment telling us which Mayberry face surprised you the most so far, because the next stretch of this list only gets heavier. Number 10, we have the neighbor who always had gossip, an opinion, and probably a covered dish ready to go. She had that exact small-town face down perfectly, popping up on show after show set in towns just like Mayberry. That was Hope Summers, who played Clara Edwards at 64 years old. She kept working steadily on classic sitcoms right up until the end of her life. She died in 1979 at 83 from heart failure. Clara could turn one tiny misunderstanding into the whole town's dinner conversation, and somehow that never stopped being funny. Number 11, we have the woman patient enough to fall for the most nervous deputy in television history. Her career actually started long before Mayberry, in films most people forget she was ever part of. That was Betty Lynn, who played Thelma Lou at age 34. Out of everything she worked on, this was the role fans simply refused to let go of. She died in 2021 at 95 after a brief illness, having lived far longer than almost anyone else on this list. Thelma Lou saw straight through Barney's nonsense every single time, and loved him anyway, which is probably the most Mayberry thing that ever happened on that show. Number 12, we have a character built entirely on wide-eyed innocence, and behind that goofy voice was something almost nobody expected. That same man walked off a small-town film set and straight into a recording career with a booming baritone voice. That was Jim Nabors, who played Gomer Pyle starting at 32 years old. He carried Gomer into his own spin-off series, and later built a real career as a singer, playing packed concert halls far from Mayberry. He died in 2017 at 87 of natural causes. You never once saw Gomer coming, and that mismatch between his character and his real voice remains one of the strangest pivots on this entire list. Time keeps moving whether Mayberry does or not, and by this point in the story, more than half a century has already slipped by. Number 13, we have the town handyman, who complained about every job right up until he finished it perfectly. He and his wife had already spent years as a working dance and comedy duo before television ever called his name. That was Paul Hartman, who played Emmett Clark at age 63. He brought decades of stage timing into a role that gave Mayberry some late-season bite. He died in 1973 at 69 after a heart attack. Emmett would grumble the entire time he was helping you, and somehow that made him more trustworthy, not less. Number 14, we have the quiet wife who never needed a big scene to feel completely real. She built a career playing exactly that kind of grounded, believable small-town presence, episode after episode. That was Mary Lansing, who played Martha Clark at 56 years old. She kept working in similar roles through Mayberry RFD in the years after. She died in 1988 at 77, with no cause widely reported. Martha was never written to steal a scene, and Mayberry felt fuller because she never tried to. Number 15, we have another quiet face in the Mayberry crowd, someone you would recognize before you could ever name him. His screen career stayed small on purpose, which is exactly why only the most dedicated fans remember him today. That was Robert McQuain, who played Joe Walters at age 27. He stayed part of that same background rhythm that made Mayberry feel like a full town instead of a set. He died in 1999 at 65, with no cause widely reported. He was never chasing the punchline. He was just one more ordinary face in a town built on ordinary charm. Number 16, we have the oldest sparkle in all of Mayberry, a man who barely started acting until most people are already thinking about retirement. That late start makes his long list of classic television appearances even more remarkable. That was Burt Mustin, who played Judd Fletcher at age 76. He kept popping up on shows like Leave It to Beaver and All in the Family for years afterward. He died in 1977 at 92 after a heart attack. Mustin could walk into a scene, say one line, and somehow make you feel like the town had 100 years of stories hiding behind him. We drop new stories like this every 2 days, so if you love Mayberry as much as we do, now is a good time to subscribe before the next name catches you off guard. Number 17, we have one of Opie's schoolyard friends, a kid actor who was already famous on a completely different iconic sitcom before he ever set foot in Mayberry. That was Richard Keith, who played Johnny Paul Jason at just 12 years old. Fans of classic television already knew him as Little Ricky on I Love Lucy, and afterward he moved further into music instead of chasing more Hollywood roles. As of 2026, he is 75 years old and living a quiet life away from acting. He was just one more kid tagging along through Opie's small adventures. Small, simple, and completely believable. Number 18, we have a face carrying decades of old Hollywood history into a town that barely existed yet. Before Mayberry, he had already appeared in hundreds of films, famously playing General Ulysses S. Grant more than once. That was Joseph Crehan, who appeared as a Mayberry townsman at 77 years old. He was not there for laughs or big speeches, just for presence. He died in 1966 at 82, with no cause widely reported. His job was simply to make Mayberry feel older and fuller than it actually was, and it worked. Number 19, we have the young pharmacist who brought a little modern spark into early Mayberry. She was already a familiar TV daughter on another beloved family show before she ever set foot behind that counter. That was Eleanor Donahue, who played Ellie Walker at age 23. She kept working for decades afterward, later showing up on Star Trek and even in Pretty Woman. As of 2026, she is 89 years old and retired from acting completely. Ellie was smart enough to never be too easily impressed by Andy, and that gave their scenes a grown-up kind of spark Mayberry rarely had elsewhere. Number 20, we have the man who had the almost impossible job of stepping into a badge everybody still associated with someone else entirely. His comedy roots ran deep, working alongside George Carlin early on, and later writing for shows including The Muppet Show. That was Jack Burns, who played Deputy Warren Ferguson at age 31. He kept working behind the scenes in comedy writing for years after leaving Mayberry. He died in 2020 at 86 from respiratory failure. Nobody could simply replace Barney Fife, but Burns still carved out his own strange little chapter of Mayberry history anyway. Almost 60 years have passed since some of these faces last walked down Mayberry's main street, and by now, most of that original town is gone. Number 21, we have the mayor who took every tiny Mayberry problem far more seriously than it ever deserved. He had spent years in Hollywood playing judges, officials, and men who looked like they belonged behind a big desk. That was Dick Elliott, who played Mayor Pike at age 74. By the time he reached Mayberry, that puffed-up small-town authority was already built into his voice. He died in 1961 at 75. Mayor Pike wanted order in a town where Barney alone made that nearly impossible, and somehow that struggle stayed funny every time. Number 22, we have another quiet townsman whose whole job was making Mayberry feel like a real breathing place. He never needed a big scene, just a steady presence near the courthouse or the sidewalk. That was Joseph Hamilton, who appeared as a Mayberry townsman at 62 years old. He stayed part of that same soft background rhythm scene after scene. He died in 1965 at 66. With no cause widely reported. That quiet, thankless kind of work is exactly what let the show breathe. Number 23, we have another kid from Opie's world, a young actor who helped make the schoolyard side of Mayberry feel completely real. He worked steadily as a child actor across several classic shows of that era. That was Sheldon Collins, who played Arnold Bailey at just 11 years old. He later stepped away from acting entirely and built a quieter life outside Hollywood. As of 2026, he is 71 years old. Arnold felt natural instead of overly polished, and that fit Mayberry's warm, small-town charm perfectly. Number 24, we have a broad, loud guest character who made even a short Mayberry appearance feel busier the second he walked in. His voice and face turned up everywhere in classic television, from The Phil Silvers Show to The Brady Bunch, plus plenty of cartoon work. That was Alan Melvin, who played a visiting hotel detective at age 39. He kept working steadily as one of television's most dependable character actors for decades. He died in 2008 at 84 after a battle with cancer. He only had one Mayberry scene to work with, and he still made it feel alive. Number 25, we have one more serious face helping fill out Mayberry's grown-up world, usually cast as a doctor, judge, or quiet man carrying real responsibility. You have probably spotted him in Bonanza, Perry Mason, or The Twilight Zone without ever learning his name. That was Roy Engel, who appeared as a Mayberry townsman at 48 years old. He kept working steadily across classic television for years afterward. He died in 1980 at 67 after suffering from meningitis. He was never there to steal a joke, just to make the town feel settled, normal, and real. Number 26, we have the boy who made the entire show feel warm from its very first episode, and this is the name almost everyone already saw coming. He was only 6 years old, yet he never once felt like a kid actor performing lines. That was Ron Howard, who played Opie Taylor at just 6 years old. He grew from that curious little boy into a Happy Days star, and then into an Oscar-winning director behind films like Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind. As of 2026, he is 72 years old and still actively making movies today. Every single person on this list helped build Mayberry, but only one of them grew up to keep telling stories the whole world still watches. If you made it this far, tell us in the comments which Mayberry face you never knew the real story behind, and share this with anyone who grew up on this show. 66 years after Mayberry first aired, almost every adult who built that little town with their own hands is already gone, and the 6-year-old boy who once played Andy's son is now the only major original cast member still shaping stories the whole world watches.